This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton. Buck, welcome. We've discussed some of your travails you've been through. I feel like it's injurious for me to continue to dwell on this.
This is what I've been trying to get across to you for some time.
All right.
You keep ripping the Band-Aid off.
I mean, I'm going to move past that at this point.
I'm trying to move past it.
I'll pass on, talk about it, but not right now. So we had a recent conversation about the important senatorial elections that are appearing in Georgia, how important that is. Some of the issues involved with money and campaigns. And another, I think, fact that's out there that needs to be considered are the allegations that the voting that occurred in the presidential election was corrupted and unfair, and the election was stolen. And indeed, that's the situation in Georgia. It's been alleged that happened. And there's lots of attention attached to how sacrosanct the voting booth is going to be in about a month or so, or several weeks. And maybe we could discuss that a little bit about corruption and the electoral process. Now, has that ever happened in America before? Have there ever been allegations that voting wasn't fair?
Well, yes, and I think there are many occasions in which there is in which the will of the people, for lack of a better term, doesn't match the returns. But I don't think that it's ever been of such a massive degree as to affect the outcome of a presidential election. I mean, certainly there have been close elections, but inevitably there are going to be hanging chads, as there were in the election of 2000. There are going to be some ballots that get misplaced. But to be on a scale of the sort that has recently been alleged, no, we've never seen anything like that.
Well, and obviously there have been millions of votes that had been subterfuge. It happened. It seems fairly, I can say this without too much fear of being rebutted, is that it maybe some things happened, but not 3 million votes worth. It's going to, we just have to say that. And now there have been points which are being brought up. Well, I saw this corruption take place, or this corruption take place. One of the big things in this forthcoming election is that there certainly needs to be some extraordinary effort to look at every allegation that's been made and reassure the people that the situation is fixed. We shouldn't have another replay of whatever occurred. And I'm just not an expert on the subject, but I think people have alleged they have the Dominion voting machines, and they're in some ways under the thrall of the Venezuelan dictators and their manufacturer. I mean, I think been these allegations.
Well, yeah, you can make allegations all you want.
So this doesn't seem to be the case. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's. I mean, I can allege that people from Mars were beamed in,
okay. And so if there are any allegations of, I don't know how the votes could not be appropriately counted. The machines are going to be okay, and I think the other issue is the idea that so many ballots have been sent out, and they've been sent out to other states, other people, and they're coming in with alleged supposedly signatures that may or may not match the signature that's on record, and that's where the knavery could take place. And I don't think that's being fixed, is it? I mean, in other words, the process by which it would be an electoral official looks at the ballot and says, well, this one is valid or not valid, and the ones that are there's some question about, I think, are put aside.
Well, it would depend on the jurisdiction. There are 50 different states.
No, just Georgia.
Georgia. Well, I think it would largely depend on the county. So,
and I think one of the things that interests me that I haven't seen discussed would be, in the past, the number of ballots that might have been put aside let's say in 2016, what percentage or what number have been put aside to look at later, and and the number now. And I just don't know, but I haven't been able to find the number. So no one has commented on it, which seems to be, it would be an important thing to do. Well, this year we only have 5 ballots that we have any questions about. You'd expect the number would be a pretty high number. I believe that, I'm making this up slightly, but there's still a substantial number of ballots were put aside, but there are many fewer than in the past, meaning that it was easier to get your ballot through. Also, more allegations out there are that ballots are being sent out of the state, sent out of other countries, sent out for dead people, and that's coming in. At least these are allegations out there. Well, it would appear to me one of the most important things to do right now is it's really important for everyone to think that the elections are fair. I don't know if we heard enough from the state government saying we've got 87 people checking this. We're really, really square. We promise you, here are the allegations were made. This is what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen. I don't think it's happening.
The Georgia Secretary of State, who is a Republican,
yes,
and who called the election in Georgia for President Trump, yes, about a week ago when
yes,
they officially started, he said much that what you just said. He said that I deal in facts, I deal in numbers, I'm an engineer, we want to do this right, and we've taken every precaution to make sure this has been done right. I think what you're seeing here is a perfect storm. I have trouble thinking of a time short of the Civil War when Americans were this divided and this angry about being divided. And that anger transforms into participation. That's why we saw such extremely high voting in this national election. And the country is very closely divided. It's not just an extremely shrill vocal minority of 10%. I mean, it's more or less 50-50. And so you're seeing a very evenly divided, very angry, very motivated electorate. And with COVID-19 throwing a monkey wrench into exactly how the voting, the technicalities, the voting takes place, all of this combines to make people hostile, suspicious, wanting to give rise to conspiracy theories, and so it's easy to throw mud. And it's a very unhealthy environment, and that's the situation we find ourselves in.
Right. I mean, in some ways, it's like the German army in World War I. Well, they were defeated. We were not defeated.
We were stabbed in the back. Yes.
Well, so the idea is the Republican Party was not defeated; it was stabbed in the back. It's sort of a similar kind of idea, and it's really quite a sea change, a demographic sea change in the state. So we both. Our kith and kin have been here for a long time. As the state, we have a sense of whatever the state's raison d'etre might be, or the way people behave, or just the general culture of the place. And suddenly, the demographic arrangements have changed, and that's quite a shock. So that the state would be a purple state. I mean, that's really quite a shock if you go back to the days of Lester Maddox or how far you want to go back. And the demographics have enormously changed. And I think the voter registration has been enormously increased. The number of people voting have been enormously increased. The number of people from other countries that live here, the number of people that have migrated into the state is a huge number. And Atlanta is really quite a Velstadt. Its population inside the Atlanta, I guess, metropolitan area exceeds the rest of the state. It's a huge urban situation, not so far different. Well, pick whatever country, pick Brussels. Maybe that's not quite right. I'll pick some city. What can I say? Rio. I can't find an appropriate city, but they're out there. It's a pretty big size world city, not really related to the hinterlands the way things used to be. And inside that Velstadt, the people have views that are urban and are very different than the remainder of the state, and that's some of the tensions that are out there. So it's hard for people to accept the fact these changes have occurred, and the idea is, well, it must have been they stole the election somehow, and you could make the case that presumably some corrupt things took place, but the election was pretty much fair. Something could have happened, as it always does, and that the state is going to be in play. And if you continue to look at the forces that are out there, it would appear that the nation and the state are going to swing to the left, though you could prophesy that. Maybe that's incorrect. And you could also say that the swing, the Trump presidency was kind of an aberration. That really the country, and the same things sort of happened in 2008. Economic difficulties, the Republicans can't do it, people are upset, and then the country goes to the left, and then the country recovers, but almost by accident, unexpectedly, Trump won, and that was the aberration. And now the situation is just swinging back as the demographics are going to make it for foreseeable future. Maybe that, but and when that happens from a demographic point of view, that's extremely difficult for people to accept. And that's one of the things that are causing these tensions. And the idea that voting irregularities happened, no comment about the demographics of the situation. Mm-hmm. I guess you'd say that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the demographics have very clearly pointed in this direction for a very long time. Occasionally, it has been given a push. Ted Kennedy and the total revamp of immigration law in the 1960s. Since we can't change the mind of the voters, we'll change who the voters are, sort of thing. That the American Southwest will be majority Hispanic, I think, in another 20 to 30 years.
I think California is.
Yes.
Am I right on that? I mean,
yes.
It's reflecting the demographics.
And
who's having children? Where are they from?
And I think it's a great irony, because that Hispanic America is winning back the American Southwest in precisely the same way that Anglo-America won the Southwest back in the 1840s. And it wasn't through military campaign, it was the bedroom. And that's what we're seeing. And typically white Anglo Teutonic America has always been the more well-to-do, that's had the more upper income group. And these people tend to reproduce less. And I mean, this is a fact of history. You do well, you tend to hoard your resources. The same thing happened, let's take France and Germany, the great fight between France and Germany in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. The French were very sophisticated. French mademoiselles used birth control, whereas the Germans didn't. It caused it gave the Germans a huge leg up. And they came very close to winning World War I because of that. So yeah, what you're seeing is it's nothing new. I mean, you've been seeing it going on for decades, and you can project it out. And
well, that's an important point, isn't it? So
yeah.
if
we're going to be more diverse.
Well, if your idea is we want income redistribution mm-hmm. and cultural change, mm-hmm. we don't like the culture here, we don't like the roots in Western Europe for whatever reason. You have a very narrow view of yourselves. It's a really great, huge world out there, and America needs to reflect that, and et cetera, et cetera. And the force driving this are, I think, the demographics we talked about now. I'll just mention there's a rather famous Colombian painter that I can't remember, but he had this great picture. These guys are like they're really tubby people drinking tea. The guys in a uniform, the kids are running around, they weigh 300 pounds apiece. The wife is just extraordinary, and they're just very tranquilly drinking tea. And above them, there's an airplane and people parachuting out, or poor people dropping down on them, down on this little tea party, and in their world. And if you believe the democratic system is whatever, it's going to be the best to work, and that it needs to reflect the views of the citizens, then inevitably it would appear to me that the the country would go to the left, as in many ways would the whole world. And the idea that you have a narrow group of people with all the wealth and culture and power, that's going to be hard to maintain that. Although, having said that, the corruption disease doesn't leave Democrats alone or leave labor leaders alone. It's sort of an animal farm situation where they, in turn, become the people that are at the Tea Party.
Well, you have to ask if there's a fundamental difference, and that we're a nation of immigrants. And traditionally, throughout most of our history, the people who come here and who are still to this day coming here and crossing the borders, they are coming because they don't like where they are and because they see greener pastures here. And traditionally, that has meant an opportunity to work and improve and better yourself. And if you see what immigrants, the Irish in the 1840s and 50s, then the East Europeans, the Germans, and they enrich the country, they build up, they work tremendously hard. And so they see this as an opportunity. And I think that there are still plenty of people today who come to America in search of that opportunity and are willing to work for it. The opportunity to work, to pursue happiness, if you will, not to be guaranteed happiness in Jefferson's terms. The question is, and this is sort of the Republican talking point, the right wing, the Trumpian talking point, that the people who are coming here are not coming for the opportunity. They're not going to contribute. They're coming to get their free stuff. And that's an entirely different tenor. And the question is that true? To what degree is that true? Does that make it different than the past? Because all the wealth of America cannot support all the poor of the world. So what do we do about it?
Well, we could discuss this a little bit. I mean, one of the things that's sort of disturbing to me is the national identity. So the idea, the immigrants are great people. I'm so impressed with them. That's what America is. They work hard. Well, so meritorious. I mean, they're just wonderful. I mean, really, I have to say that. Almost everybody that I've met that's here recently, that would be their viewpoint, I think. It's really, really great, and that's what the country is, and we should welcome people. And then the question happens after that, how do we amalgamate everyone into one nation? And the idea was, well, we have a melting pot, and we're all going to just fuse together into this extraordinary creatures of the future, the Americans, or this be a fused nation of all kinds of different demographic past. They're all together here. They're all doing great. They've been all the shackles of kings and dictatorships and the chains of oppression have all been removed. And now they can just flourish like glorious flowers, the city on the hill, just wonderful. Well, the problem is, in my opinion, is that's not a sustainable kind of national arrangement. And that what I see happening is that the country is turning into sort of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and that each of the ethnic groups are laying claim to the goodies in the country. So I don't know, let's pretend we're Germans here, and then, I don't know, millions of Romanians are coming in, and the Romanians are saying, well, I want this and I want that, and so there's some negotiations going back and forth, and then some degree of jobs and wealth are granted to a new group, and the groups compete with one another. They don't consider themselves the same people, and indeed, what happens is that the mythology of the country, its national story, is demeaned. So this Austro-Hungarian Empire, we have the great emperor, whatever. No, it's a oppressive group of people that have always injured everyone else. And they put together this false aristocracy, and they've done all these bad things, and it's just terrible for our group. And the best thing, we'd love just to leave, and we're forced into this arrangement, and we'll deprecate the history of the country. So some of what's happening is sailing the ship to this terrible direction, which is the Austro-Hungarian Empire direction, where people routinely despise, is not too hard of a word, in some circles it might be, despise the national identity for the evil that it's done in the past. They don't dislike it, they despise it. and they want to tear the temple down, and people resist that, and these tensions are arising, and a lot of this is should be an intellectual debate that we're on right now that we can't really easily have, can we? If we talk about national identity, can you have a neutral place to talk about that? I mean, it's hard to do it. People scream at each other.
Well, I've dedicated my life to try to have neutral debates, and it's always been tremendously frustrating, and it's not getting any easier. A couple of ideas there. One difference from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which came to a gruesome end, of course, is that I wonder how much, outside of Vienna, for instance, how much was there intermingling of the populations? It seems to me that the dozen different ethnicities really were in their own localities, certainly as between the Austrian and Germanics on the one hand and the Magyars of Hungary on the other, but broken to the Czechs.
There's a little area there.
And here there's much more intermixing, I think, or at least the potential for it than there was in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And secondly, if you're, and this is why you should have immigration and enforce immigration policies to try to bring about that socialization and buying into the national mythos. But even so, the question about that mythos is, obviously it is flawed. And you have to ask yourself, what is the flaw? Is the flaw that it is intrinsically evil and intrinsically wrong, which is sort of the vibe that I was getting from you when you were channeling these people. When you were channeling
I'm
them.
not me
Yeah,
personally,
not you
but
yourself.
people have these viewpoints.
Or is it that we've got the right ideals and our failings are simply that we have failed to live up to them as we should? And I think those are two radically different propositions. I don't think anybody can argue that America is perfect. I think that there are plenty of skeletons in our closet that the disaffected are trying to drag out. And my question would be, why those skeletons? Is it because we have an oppressive system or because we have not lived up to the ideals?
Well, I think the fundamental issue, there are a lot of issues out there, but the fundamental one is that by accident, the Western Europeans just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and they had sort of the rationality of the scientific revolution, all the power that produced, and they had access to the Atlantic Ocean, and they had a virgin world here that they could come in and occupy, and they did. And the cultures that they saw or confronted, they were able to overwhelm and establish their own sort of hierarchy. And so this hierarchical kind of arrangement was present. Would say, well, the highest and greatest good would be a Christian gentleman, or something like that, and that can quote Shakespeare, or maybe even better, can quote a Latin poet, or even better, are able to read the original Greek, or whatever the idea is, that this is sort of the summa bonum of the best in the world. And then people that have been overwhelmed by this European group are obviously, it's going to be a difficult journey there, and they feel like they've been ground down by the Europeans and on and on. And as the self-confidence has weakened among European Americans, and contrary-wise, the people that have been ground down have risen up. I mean, obviously there's going to be some rejigging going on, and that can be a very painful process. And it's playing itself out in a political dialogue that's out there. And really, if you look at what the story is underneath the surface in this senatorial election, that's kind of what's there in many ways.
I suppose so. But it takes us back. We talk about overwhelming the native populations, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. We'll take Jefferson's statements that all men are created equal and that they have certain natural rights. Now, let's start with the premise that Jefferson really believes that. And let's start with the premise that the dominant culture really believes that. Well, if they really believe that, how do you explain slavery? How do you explain the fact that Indians essentially had no rights? Now, gradually over time, the community that was entitled to those things expanded. But you have to see them as just flaming hypocrites at the beginning. So I would say that these are great ideals. There's nothing wrong with the ideals. It's just that the people touting them did not practice them as they should be practiced. That's a radically different thing from saying, no, that's all completely wrong, and we need to trash the whole thing, and they were lying, and their ideas were wrong from the beginning. But I would say even if you look at socialism, if you look at militant communism, at some level they are going to buy at least into the notion of equality that Jefferson touted. So I don't think you can just dismiss it out of hand.
Well, it's a fundamental, issue is that you'd like to have everyone equal. On the other hand, you have to, there needs to be some kind of ordered structure where the government assesses issues for the common good and makes policy decisions that would be in everyone's interest. That would be the system in place. And then for many people, they're just going to be left out or from the decision-making process, or a great distance from the decision-making process. And the way the brain works is that it's so tempting, and almost always happens, that the people that are in leadership positions of whatever reason, they're corrupted by the leadership, and so you wind up with the impossibility, pretty much the impossibility of really maintaining, long-lasting equality. One reason is that people are inherently unequal as far as their virtues, size, ability to shoot three-point baskets, their health. I mean, there are just so many things that people are unequal. They're just not the same. I think the Jefferson's word, you could say, really were made an equal process. Yes. It was an equal process. You could also say that you could jump to religious issues, that in the eyes of God, to use that phrase, that everyone is equal. And indeed, if people are more at risk that possess power and wealth, their chance of sin is higher because they've got, I hope we're getting into too philosophical religions. I'll avoid it.
Well, it comes to the definition of what is equal: opportunity, condition, or outcome. But unfortunately, since we're winding down here, that would have to be a subject for, and I think we could easily fill an entire episode with that one, and that's what we'll have to do.
Well, what we've chanced upon in the Georgia election is the idea of the social distractions that are occurring, the difficulties of amalgamating people with different viewpoints into some kind of common sense of nationhood. And I hope that their Democrats they're going to be the party in power mostly, and I hope they will be moderate in their ambitions.
Well,
they would be very important, and then they would also respond. It's particularly important to say, if you're making these allegations, the election was corrupt, we're not going to dismiss that. We're going to do everything possible to confirm that there was no knavery that happened, and this is the true will of the people. And we'll go, whatever charges you want to make them. We're going to have a special commission. We'll put it on television and on, and we'll get to the bottom.
And we will certainly see that unfold in coming weeks.
All right. Well, good. Thanks, Bucky. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Thanks.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.